which is ironic because throughout his life insisted he hated Christmas. He's Jewish, didn't celebrate Christmas, thought all of his Christmas songs were terrible, but his company was St. Nicholas Music.
All right, for Ben, I don't have, like I said, I don't have a fancy stinger. So unfortunately, you're going to have to jump right into it and just reintroduce it. I don't know why we're having issues today, but that is how it's going to be today.
All right, well, welcome back to Mixed Media. Earlier today, we heard from Irving describing why It's a Wonderful Life is a 5 out of 5 film for him and why you should watch it this holiday season and cry, apparently. And Nathan just summarized a ton of things that happened in the video game industry this past year. I'm going to talk a little bit, going back to kind of holiday focus, and talk a little bit about some, holiday, winter, Christmassy themed films that have good music. And I'm just going to start us off by saying that, when it comes to Christmas films, I'm pretty culturally illiterate. There are so many Christmas films that I don't know, that I've never seen. I've never even seen Home Alone. And, how can I talk about, great Christmas scores without talking about Home Alone? Because, John Williams. I do know some of the music from it, but I can't really talk about it because I don't know all of it, nor do I know the film. I know.
The film is fantastic, Ben. You need to watch it.
Yeah. So there, I guess what I'm going to say is it's going to reveal the depths of my cultural ignorance when it comes to Christmas films. Feel free to head to the comments or on Discord you can write about say criticize me and say Ben, how come you didn't mention this film? And you've never seen that. What's wrong with you? And I'll have to agree with you. But we're gonna go with some things I know. Okay, so I want to start off by saying, and this is maybe a bold claim, but if you're a music composer, Christmas music and this holiday music in general is probably the easiest thing to write, but maybe the hardest thing to write well, because there are just so many tropes at this point. They're so worn. You could try going, and Christmas music in general is it's a really broad category too, because you have Christmas carols of all sorts, right? Lots of traditional things. You got classical music, a lot of which has nothing to do with Christmas, oh wow, the Alleluia chorus from the Messiah. Easter, so things like that, or people like listening to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, right? The Ode to Joy has absolutely nothing to do with Christmas. So there are those different kind of avenues, for Christmas music, but in the general American consciousness, Christmas music, it's pretty easy to distill what that is, but it's very hard to do well. And we're going to talk about here in a moment the king of American Christmas music, but we'll get to that. So for me, when I'm thinking about Christmas music, like I said, I kind of broaden it to things that are kind of wintry in general, and because I like listening to things that are kind of wintry, even though I don't live in a place where I get much snow or any snow during December. But I like to imagine that I do. Yeah, I feel like for some reason in my heart, things that are just wintry in general work with Christmas, and oftentimes better than Christmassy things work with Christmas. And honestly, a lot of the tropes, even in things that are very Christmassy, come from things that are what I would call wintry. And so three pieces, classical pieces, that I think are kind of important to keep in mind as a background to Christmas and holiday music in general. Of course, it goes without saying, I'm also going to caveat that all of these are Russian pieces, and that's not just because I'm a huge fan of Russian music, but because Russian composers tend to be very good at things having to do with snow. I think understandably. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some fantastic things. I could probably expand this and talk about Rudolph's The Blizzard and Snow is Falling, two wonderful pieces by him, which I'm not even going to mention, but great pieces. He's another great composer for capturing. All of his composers are great at capturing this sense of like falling snow, which I think is really what wintry music is kind of after, right? It's kind of after this like the sparkle, the dance of snowflakes. Okay, so obviously the quintessential piece is Tchaikovsky's ballet, The Nutcracker, which not his greatest ballet by any stretch of imagination. It's not his best by an enormous margin. Sleeping Beauty is infinitely better musically, but you're not going to go out and watch Sleeping Beauty. You know, you're going to go and see a holiday production of The Nutcracker. And The Nutcracker it's responsible for a lot of these tropes. It's a piece that, of course, we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Harry Potter and the celeste or celesta, that kind of sparkly piano-like instrument that is featured in the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. That's pretty much its introduction to Western music in Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. And that is like one of the quintessential Christmassy instruments after that. And you can also look at the chorus, right? Dance of the Snowflakes, which I guess ends the first act of the ballet. And that is one of my favorite Christmassy things. Again, it kind of exposes, and I don't know if it's responsible for all these tropes, but we've got wordless choir, sounds very lovely, high angelic voices. We have in particular the flutes, and if you're a flute player, Christmas music, big thing, because flutes are a very Christmassy instrument. Lots of flutes doing motions that are very much kind of like a snowflake kind of swirling its way down. Okay. I gave Irving some links to include, so you can go listen to the complete Nutcracker if you want, and put you in the holiday mood. Another, really quickly, two more things. So Tchaikovsky's first symphony is called Winter Daydreams, and that's another fantastic piece, much earlier than the Nutcracker, and it doesn't have the celesta, but is very much about, just going by movement titles, about dreaming about like snow falling. And it's got all of these same elements. It's very flute and piccolo driven, lots of very shimmery sorts of things, very interesting harmony. So I recommend listening to that as well. And finally, there's an opera by Tchaikovsky's contemporary, Rimsky-Korsakov, called The Night Before Christmas. Sometimes I think in English it's normally called Christmas Eve, but Russian is literally The Night Before Christmas, which is not entirely Christmassy, but it has some really fantastic moments in the suite and it's kind of odd, but the main character has made a deal with Satan and is riding on a broomstick. Yes, it's kind of odd opera, but is riding on a broomstick and seeing the Christmas landscape, and absolutely gorgeous. Lots of very sparkly, flute, celeste, harp, glockenspiel, all your quintessential kind of sparkly, tinkly instruments playing, really wonderful. Okay, so those kind of set a lot of the ideas behind Christmas and wintry things in general. A really good example of that in action is I guess it's not recent anymore. What year did Frozen come out in? 2013, I think.
I don't remember.
Yeah, 2013 and 2014, something like that. Probably like holiday season 2013, I guess. Maybe. Anyway, so it's not really a recent film, I guess, but the first Frozen film is very much in that tradition. And like I said, it's not a Christmas film by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly has its wintry elements, of course, right? We have Elsa, kind of the queen of ice and snow. And not all of it really fits in that mold. It's got its foot in a lot of different places. And, we could talk about Frozen for a long time.
I could too.
Oh, we should do an episode on that one day.
Okay.
Very interesting music. But I sent, put some links to the most wintry moments in it. Those include a very, very opening scene where Anna and Elsa are kind of playing, and, we get to see Elsa's powers just before she hurts her sister with the ice. So they're kind of enjoying playing in with wintry things. Again, we have these really light textures, very, very much based in kind of Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov and all those three pieces I just mentioned in their kind of textures, kind of strings, lots of pizzicato strings kind of undergirding it, lots of very whirling woodwinds, very sparkly things. We also get an incredibly Tchaikovskyan moment, the general theme that runs through the whole section where Anna is, she is discovered Christoph, that his name, and they are making their way up the North Mountain to find Elsa and her, and her ice castle. And the theme that runs through there, it's a very simple 3/4 idea, and there's lots of fascinating things that the composer Christoph Beck does with it. But the most magical moment of that, which I did include, it's I guess just before they meet Olaf, and we get this all sorts of really wonderful colors. Then it ends with the theme played very slowly on piccolo with just tremolo, but kind of shaking strings underneath of it. It's really and our celesta kind of doing all sorts of sparkly things as well. It is very Tchaikovsky, and it is very beautiful, very effective. The theme disappears after that. I guess it's just like the Finding of a North Mountain theme or something. I don't know why. It should be used a lot more. It's probably the best theme from that film. But anyway, so when it's trying to be wintry, when it's trying to evoke winter landscape, it does it very effectively, and it plays with those tropes. Okay, so two more traditional Christmas films, and these two films came out in consecutive years. So in 1964, we have the classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and 1965, we get the other classic, A Charlie Brown Christmas. And so two classic Christmas films. I guess Rudolph, I think, was originally a TV film. Well, I guess Charlie Brown was too. As far as I know, the A Charlie Brown Christmas, that album, one of the most, if not maybe the most played Christmas album still on all every streaming platform, and which is interesting because it is not a very standard Christmas. It doesn't fit in the mold. So Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, composed all songs and all music composed by Johnny Mercer. Wait, I gotta make sure I get that name right because there are so many Johnny M's. I should remember. I think it's Johnny Mercer. No, Johnny Marks. Sorry, Johnny Mercer is another name who does very kind of similar stuff. So I get them mixed up. Johnny Marks, who basically he's the king of Christmas music. Basically, if it's a Christmas song that's not All I Want for Christmas Is You or White Christmas, he wrote it. And which is ironic because throughout his life insisted he hated Christmas. He's Jewish, didn't celebrate Christmas, thought all of his Christmas songs were terrible. But his company was St. Nicholas Music, and that's what he did. He had his foot in songwriting in a number of different genres, but Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is what made almost all the money that he made in his life.
Wow.
And he's kind of responsible for the creation of that too. The brother of his wife actually wrote the story, and it had been kind of discarded, and he kind of found like this note of his brother-in-law and said, yeah, I should maybe make a song about that. Made a song, and it became an instant hit, so we had to make a film out of it. He thought it was one of his worst songs ever, but obviously the public did not and does not agree. Okay, so Johnny Marks, very good music. I have tried to research whether he did his own orchestrations on this film or not, and I cannot find anyone listed as an orchestrator, which doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't have anybody's help. But we're going to assume that he did it all by himself, which is truly remarkable. He was a kind of jazz pianist in his own right, and he was inspired by Irving Berlin and wanted to be like that, and always regretted that he got stuck being the Christmas guy instead of writing, kind of jazz standards. But he is really responsible for injecting a lot of jazz elements into American Christmas music in general, and particularly in filmic stuff. And yeah, so he's kind of a blend of these things. He's got elements of this jazz. Like I said, he was a jazz pianist playing at famous jazz bars in France as a young man. So he's got a lot of elements of that. But he retains the harmonic complexity of a lot of jazz. But he borrows a lot of ideas from this kind of wintry, these wintry tropes that I mentioned. So if you listen to the score for Rudolph, you will notice that it is very dominated by lots of flutes doing their typical holiday style runs, right? Kind of snow flurry stuff. Pretty much every note of every melody is outlined by glockenspiel and harp and Schlosser, or some combination of those three instruments. It gives it that holiday ring to it, a Christmassy, snowflake, twinkly, sparkly sound. So he's combining those elements, and it's all very tuneful. That's probably why he's so successful as a Christmas song writer. Christmas is kind of the time of the year in which we are most bombarded with melody. Right? We don't get a ton of melody in most of the music people tend to listen to throughout the year, and then we get to Christmas and it's all melody and
that's why
lots of chromatic harmony in most songs. If it's more rock or oriented, like I was just listening to Mariah Carey and I'm like, see, how's this a good Christmas song? There's no harmonic complexity. It's like the simplest bass line in the world. So that's, things that are like a truly kind of, I don't want to say a forced attempt at Christmas popularity, but are, different genres trying to kind of insert themselves into Christmas. They don't necessarily maintain these elements. But most of these Christmas songs that we listen to, kind of very harmonically rich, very melodically rich. And that is what music Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is. It's aided, of course, by the fact that we got Burl Ives and his wonderfully rich voice as Sam the Snowman, as our narrator. And yeah, it's a wonderful film. It's a film I watch every Christmas. It is a little bit archaic. You can take some fault with its gender representations within the reindeers, but it's just I don't know. I just enjoyed the film. I enjoyed it a lot as a child, and it's so musical and happy, and that's where source of a lot of our Christmas standards. And Johnny Marks in general, but that film in particular. We kind of get the opposite the next year with A Charlie Brown Christmas. We have Vince Guaraldi, who is a jazz pianist and kind of a quintessential master of the West Coast style of jazz. And I guess the story of how he came to be involved was they asked him to compose music for an unreleased documentary the year prior, about Charles Schulz, the creator of Peanuts. And although that was never released, they thought that his music sounded very Charlie Brown-like. So they decided to bring him in for the first Charlie Brown film, and obviously the most popular Charlie Brown film. And the kind of, the sound of this is his trio. So piano, bass, and drums, mostly drums just doing brushing, so very light. And a children's choir of some kids from, I believe, just outside of San Francisco, from some church choir. And they were deliberately asked to sing slightly out of tune because children don't know how to sing in tune, even though these kids obviously could sing in tune. So that was the sound they're going for, to make it sound authentic, like, right, the kind of average kids of Charlie Brown. So it's a very muted affair. It's jazzy and, harmonically rich, but it is so sparse, in its texture. It's mostly just piano, a little kind of brushing, and maybe you can hear the bass a little bit. And I think that works very well for the film. We kind of get that bleakness of winter, and it's not really a film that is like filled with happy emotions all the way throughout. We've got Charlie Brown, who's kind of depressed. He doesn't know why. He doesn't like Christmas. People are kind of being mean to him. He gets his support from everyone at the end, but it's a pretty muted thing, and maybe that also matches the kind of drawing of Peanuts, sparsely drawn. Yeah. So, it's a combination of traditional Christmas carols, some of his own things, with the, children's choir singing slightly out of tune. We do get some nice moments like the waltz called Skating, when we get when ice skating. That is very nice. And that is kind of in that, general like floating world of Christmas music, but in a kind of jazz manner. Yeah, and again, I believe that is pretty much in every streaming platform the most popular Christmas album right now, and has been for a very long time. So it's interesting because, again, it's not the most popular, not the most standard Christmas fare. I don't know that any song on it in particular, or any piece on it in particular, is like that highly played, but I think as an album overall it is. Christmas music, I think, is tend to become a little bit more corny in films. You can listen to the example I put of the suite from Polar Express. Wow, sorry. Which is Alan Silvestri. And, that's a little bit more contemporary. And what does that give us? We get big Christmassy melodies. So it's kind of a mixture of all these things, melody, kind of sparkly stuff, lots of flutes, choir, of course, and some jazzier elements, kind of stealing some of those, not stealing necessarily, but using some of those Johnny Marks songs and Johnny Marks elements, and then also kind of getting this like really regal, like, brass stuff, like this is Christmas, and like, here is this like the beautiful tree, and that's maybe a little bit more recent, just kind of like really regal brass heavy stuff. So you get all of that in Polar Express. I don't think it's necessarily a wonderful film or anything, and it's mostly a lot of songs they licensed from other people in the film. But where they do get music, that's what the music tends to be. So that's why I put a link to the suite, not all the songs in it. So that's a little bit more where Christmas music in films tends to be today. granted, like I said, I'm pretty culturally ignorant, so there are plenty of Christmas films that I don't know. So those are kind of a trends in Christmas and holiday music. Like I said, a lot of it kind of going back to tropes established by composers who are thinking about snow to some degree, like Rimsky-Korsakov and Tchaikovsky, and you can see a lot of other Russian composers too, and I'm sure it's in other places as well. But people in France not writing as many pieces about snow falling generally in the classical world as people in Russia were, just because of the climate.
That was really interesting. I feel like I got like a beautiful tour through different kinds of Christmas music.
I don't want to cause no problems. I just want to live my life, but I keep on hearing about nonsense. Me and my dons ain't mobsters, but when you see imposters, we know how to read them faces, same way you know how to read them comments. If you want to talk, let's talk, but around here, make sure you walk and your talk is constant.